Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi-ho! Ha ha ha!
Hey everyone, Genome here, coming to you with the next episode in my hack and or slash review series. This is a series where I take a look back at horror films of old, more specifically franchises of old that have to do with the horror genre, and kind of see if they still hold up to today's standards, or at least today's genome standards, right? As ephemeral a subject as that is. So, getting right down to it, I'm going to start the next in my series of franchises. You might have seen my previously done Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Living Dead series, you know, the Romero stuff. Well, now I'm moving on to the Child's Play series. That's right. Chucky and friends are fixing to get the genome treatment. So let's see how they pan out. So where else would I start but with the original from 1988?
And there's nothing innocent about Child's Play.
Directed by Tom Holland. Yes, Child's Play was kind of a really innovative horror movie at the time. And this is actually at a time when innovation was starting to wind down a bit in the horror genre. It was definitely getting more formulaic and rote. And of course, we moved out ready to move into the 90s when things took a downward spiral like nobody's business, but that's a story for another video. So let's go ahead and tear down the original movie. I'm going to go ahead and give you a really brief plot synopsis. Not going to give away the ending, don't worry, no spoilers here. And then I'm going to go into some pros and cons and finally give an overall rating to the movie. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we are opened up with a slam bang opener, right? The perfect opener for this type of movie. He gets right down into it. Looks like there's a bad guy running away from a cop. He's shooting at the cop shoots back, cop gets the better of it. And somehow the killer transfers his soul into the body of a doll, a good guy doll.
Be the power I beg of you!
Good guy dolls are obviously some My Buddy and Gotcha Kid references for the time, so you know, patent pending and all that. And we are segueing into the plight of a single mother. I think the father was supposed to have died or left. I can't remember what the actual deal was here. But anyway, father's out of the picture, so single mom having to work double shifts at work. And needs to go home and give the kid a present for the birthday. The kid earlier had alluded to, also by watching the cartoon, that he really wanted a good guy's doll, right? It's the hot, the rage doll. It's the Teddy Ruxpin of its day, right? So gotta get that good guy's doll for the kid. Kid's played by Alex Vincent, and his name is Andy, and have a very big role in this movie. And mom is played by Catherine Hicks. So kind of an all-star cast here, right? Also, the main police officer in this movie is played by Chris Sarandon, and of course, Charles E. Lay / Chucky is played by Brad Dourif, in kind of the role that made him the most famous, which is surprising since he's only on screen for the series for like 3 minutes. But anyway, so yes, the doll is given. And right at the bat, we can tell something's wrong, but we as the audience know something wrong. But that doesn't dispel our unease, right, at the situation, because we know something's going to happen. But what? What?
I haven't got the vaguest idea.
Well, what happens is Chucky starts telling Andy to do things, and basically not being a very nice person, because he wasn't a nice person in real life, we've come to find out. He was, the West Side Strangler, and he was responsible for like half a dozen deaths and maybe more. Worked with a partner named Eddie. Who he also swore vengeance on before he died. He swore vengeance on the police officer and Eddie, his partner, for whatever reason, when he died.
I'm gonna get you! And I'm gonna get Eddie! No matter what!
So, yeah, we are led on a merry chase of hijinks, so much, but more like horror-inspired hijinks of Chucky. And the doll is coming to life, but nobody believes Andy. He tells Andy he's secret right away, which comes into play much later in the movie. And yes, nobody believes poor Andy, even when deaths start occurring around him, and then Andy starts acting very strange. All of this kind of comes to a head when Andy is put into a public care system, and because they think he's gone loco, right? He's no longer compos mentis. Well, poor Andy knows that Chucky's coming for him for whatever reason. But we do find out later on that Chucky was involved with voodoo, right? He had a voodoo mentor, and that was how he transferred his soul into the Chucky doll.
You know, when I came here learning all that stuff about how to beat death, I thought maybe you were pulling my chain. But not now. Not now.
He was actually looking for a human when he died, but he couldn't find one, so he grabbed the nearest thing to him. And yeah, there it is. So we come to find out later that Chucky has to actually put his soul into the first human that he told his secret to. Very convenient. Who happens to have been Andy. Or else he's going to be stuck in the doll's body forever. So yes, right here is a merry chase with Chucky trying to track down Andy. He's actually got a homing beacon for whatever reason in his head. He knows where Andy is at all times, but yeah, this is a movie. You can forget some of this more incredulous stuff, right? And yeah, and then we come along to the idea of the detective, Mike, once again played by Chris Randon. He kind of comes around to the plight of Andy and mother Catherine, because Catherine had discovered Chucky's secret in a very, very tense scene getting toward the latter third of the movie where Chucky reveals himself to her. And not in a perverted way, but in a maniacal killer way. Very creepy and well executed scene.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
But yeah, so the cop comes around to their way of thinking, and he goes in to try to help save the day, and there's a gigantic, when I say gigantic, but a big confrontation at the end in the apartment. Yes, the Barclay apartment is a rough place to be. Ask the babysitter. So yeah, terror in between ensues, and there's a big fight out at the end, and I will close it right there and not tell you any more of the movie because I don't want to ruin it for you, especially if you've never seen this before. It's a classic. So that's it. That's Child's Play in a nutshell. Basically, mass killer puts his soul into doll. Doll comes to life. Doll wants to come out of, or the soul of that's in the doll wants to come out of the Chucky doll into another human body, and at the end we find out it's going to be has to be Andy. So yeah, there's the whole child in peril thing here too, which is very rare in horror or basically any kind of movie. So that is the basic premise of Child's Play, and it's definitely a play on some of the more killer doll things, like the old Chatty Cathy doll that got made into Talkie Tina for the Twilight Zone, or the Devil doll from the Trilogy of Terror TV series. Everyone remembers him. Yeah, great stuff there. But this is taken up to a whole new level, especially as far as special effects go. So let's get into some pros and cons real quick, and I'll give you an overall grade for the movie. So let's go with cons first. Cons, the pace is very brisk in this movie, which actually works itself well, because then you don't start asking logical fallacy questions like, you know, how can this doll be so strong and so scary? How can he get around so fast? How does he know where Andy is at all times? You know, we can get past all that because it just keeps moving. It doesn't give you a chance to breathe. There's very little setup in this movie, right? But when it does, it's very effective. So you can say that maybe the story's a little bit hokey. It's a horror movie about a doll coming to life. What do you want, people? It's going to be a little bit hokey. It has a nice tie-in with voodoo. Was kind of a nice little way. It wasn't just him being evil and being able to put himself in the doll. There was actually some sort of setup that that allowed him to do so.
Over here. Hi. It's me, Chucky. What do you think? The gree work?
You know, some of the acting is a little stiff. It's not too bad, though. I mean, Andy goes back and forth from being kind of bad to actually having a few really good scenes where he seems generally terrified, excuse me. And it's so hard with child actors, so I can't really discredit Alex Vincent for that. I know he came back to reprise his role in 2019's Curse of Chucky, so hey, he's still a part of the franchise. So no real problems there. Catherine Hicks actually does seem fairly believable as Mom. Sometimes Chris Sarandon, though, plays it a little too flippant, I guess you could say, as the cop Mike. Detective Mike, I guess you could say, and his partner's kind of a goof too, but whatever. I mean, it is what it is. So there's a little bit of stiffness in the acting, but most part, it's pretty good, especially for an 80s horror movie. It's actually, probably I'd say above average, because it kept the cast small. They didn't introduce way too many bit players. You know, there's like 3 bit players in this movie. And yeah, they don't just, they don't overemphasize that. So character development can really be a hindrance in some slasher movies. Well, this one takes a more streamlined approach. Which also goes into the fact that this is a very low body count horror movie for the 80s, especially. There's basically 3 on-screen deaths in this movie. And while Chucky is involved in all of them, well, you don't really get to see him close the deal, right? I guess you can say there's 4 deaths if you include Charles Ray, but did he die? Did he really die? Because his soul moved on into the doll. So yeah, very low body count. So I think that's one of the reasons they didn't introduce too many tertiary characters in this movie, is the simple fact that they weren't planning on a big body count. But, a horror movie is not made or broken by a high body count. Look at the recently done Never Hike Alone movie. There was basically 2 deaths in that entire movie, and that happened all the way at the end. But it was still a very effective fan film horror movie, right? And same deal here. You don't need a high body count. Chucky is creepy enough as an idea without it. So, but anyway, for gore fiends or horror fiends, there's not really that inventive kills in this movie, and there's not very many of them. So that is possibly a con there too. And the ending kind of seems to drag on just a little bit. I like the perilous ending, but there's an awful lot. He just keeps getting back up. Chucky keeps getting back up, and up, and it's like the Terminator, man. It's like, maybe they could have shaved a little bit of that off, and some of it's pretty unbelievable, like him crawling around without an arm and a leg, how was he getting around through air vents and all, whatever. I'm not going to go into that too much, because that kind of gives away some more of the ending, but yeah, that was kind of goofy a little bit, but once again, you got to suspend some disbelief and just enjoy yourself. So that's pretty much all the cons of this movie. Now let's get on some pros. What and concept for this movie. Great idea. You're bringing back the whole living killer doll thing and just ramping it up to the next level. For one thing, he's not this tall, right? He's like, I don't know, 2.5 feet tall, so he's a little bit bigger, so I guess a little more intimidating. He's based on a serial killer, so we know he's a bad guy, right? And you give him kind of this street talk, and it's more like, he doesn't sound like he has dialogue written for him, right? He sounds like a guy, a jackass that you meet at the subway station talking crap, right? So that's cool. Brad Dourif plays him perfectly, and you can't really imagine anybody else playing him.
I said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch! You filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
Which is really funny because his voice is very soft and cultured, right? So he has to go with this kind of, hoodlum from Milwaukee kind of sound to him. But it's kind of interesting. Great concept. Chucky is perfectly executed for the most part, with different animatronics, live actors, and just some camera trickery, some first-person view trickery. Too, which is very, very cool, and it helps set up the kind of creepiness factor, especially when he's running through the apartment and stuff unseen. Very, very creepy stuff. So great concept there. Chucky is, once again, realized perfectly in this movie. You don't see too much of him, but you actually do see quite a bit of him, which is surprising for a movie of this time. Because, the animatronics had to all be done practically. So nowadays they would just CGI it in there for the most part and not have to worry about it. But yeah, they actually had to, the proof was in the pudding in this movie, and you saw a lot of Chucky in front of the camera. It was a really good blend, like I said, of live actors and animatronics. So very well realized. The doll looks great, especially later on as he's turning more human. And he gets damaged and stuff too, and he looks absolutely terrifying after he's taken some real damage in the apartment fight scene. So yeah, that would give kids nightmares forever. Don't show this movie to kids who like dolls. I'm telling you now, it will not work out well for you.
Hello, Andy.
So yeah, perfectly realized Chucky and perfectly cast as Brad Dourif. Like I said, the humans all do their job respectably. I think Catherine Hicks is very believable as mom here. She does seem genuinely concerned and worried, plays the role well. Andy is good. Child actor Alex Vincent did pretty well with it, actually. Like I said, he can be a little whiny sometimes, but it's how they make kids sound in movies, and what do you want? Was he like 6 or 7 in this movie? I think he did a pretty superior job for the most part. Any annoyance that people have about him is probably because he's written that way. I don't think it was his fault that he sounds like that. They're trying to make him sound like a little kid. So, yeah, for about the 4 characters you see on screen for the most part, they all do their job very well. Even the voodoo guy is pretty cool, right? We don't actually get to see enough of him, but that's all right. They don't linger in this movie on side characters. They just keep the plot moving. It's about Andy and Chucky and Mom for the most part, right? Some great suspense scenes in this. The scene where Mike, the detective, is trapped in the car and getting pummeled in the car by Chucky, who's in the back seat, first choking him, stabbing at him, and then crashes the car, and he's running around the car, laughing maniacally. Great scene, man. It's very tense and stressful.
Hi, Mikey!
The scene in the apartment where Mom first finds out about Chucky is very creepy because they use very effective soft synth music, right, to kind of heighten the mood. The scene where he's stalking the hapless babysitter around is creepy as well, man. It's executed well, and you can tell he's not just like a butcher. It's almost like Chucky knows his limitations in the doll form, so he sets people up. That's how he does things. He doesn't go out there usually physically trying to incapacitate people till the very end, of course, but he sets people up to make up for his new diminutive and weaker body state, I guess you can say. So that part's cool. So there's a lot of really tense moments, and dolls in dark houses and hallways are scary. I guess that genre's never gone out of style. So that part's great too. Pretty good soundtrack too. It's mostly inobtrusive, but it's a good standard '80s horror soundtrack, maybe a little bit better than average. No notable songs on there as far as licensed music, but that's okay. This movie doesn't need that. And yeah, I don't know, some really decent special effects as well. Chucky's animatronics, like I said earlier, look really good. Some of the sets look nice, especially that old abandoned house that Eddie, the ex-partner, is in, looks really good and disgusting. The apartment does seem a little bit big sometimes for all the chase scenes that go on there, but it's a good spot, as good a spot as any. And the toy store was a really good set at the very beginning, and especially it had a really good explosion scene too at the very beginning. So for a lower budget affair, that was actually a nice touch. Another thing I do want to give a little bit of praise to is the camera work in this movie. This camera work is a lot like Steve Miner or Tom McLaughlin. There's a lot of camera, first-person shots. There's a lot of camera following the action, right? It's a very active camera. A lot of 80s horror movies were known for really static camera work, one shot. The camera doesn't follow anybody around, so the actors kind of stay in frame themselves. Well, this one, there's all kinds of really cool perspective shots, which is nice, getting it down from Chucky's perspective. And it's just overall an active camera, especially in chase scenes, really gives a dynamic sense of movement, right? And it really invests the viewer in what is going on the screen. Excellent camera work too in this movie. So yeah, a lot of praise for this flick. So let's go ahead and get on to the final grade of this movie. Let's just get on to it. This is a 4 out of 5 movie. This movie is great. As far as the 80s horror movies goes, a lot of it was schlock, some was extremely inventive, and this definitely falls in the latter category. The living doll genre had been done before, but really climbed to its zenith with this movie, and Chucky became a household name, almost as popular as your Freddys and Jasons out there. In fact, as far as horror movies go, horror aficionados, he probably is just as famous as them. And he had the unfortunate effect of hurting doll sales for quite a few years, and causing consternation among critics and watchdog groups. But whatever the case may be, this is extremely innovative take on the living doll saga. It was well executed. You become very invested in Andy and his mother's plight. Chucky is wonderfully realized. He's a flesh and blood character, regardless of his current physical circumstances, and his motivations actually make some sense. It's a good, tight story with an interesting premise, and it's executed extremely well. I really recommend this movie quite highly to those who have never seen it before, or maybe haven't seen it since the 80s. And definitely a worthy movie, and really it almost would have been a landmark movie if they would have stayed right here with the first movie. But unfortunately, they went on making a ton of sequels to varying success. Now, I've only seen the first 3 of them, and I've also seen Curse of Chucky, so there's like the whole middle section I haven't seen yet, but from what I hear, they're not the greatest in the world. But this movie would have been perfect as a standalone movie, but it did so well that they wanted to keep making some more sequels, some to lesser degrees of excellence. But this movie itself is excellent. It's a suspenseful movie. It's not just a slasher. It's a low body count, but they count on the creepiness of Chucky to kind of carry the movie, and it does it very well. Andy, once again, is always in peril, so it's always difficult to watch, especially as a parent. A child in distress, especially one who is witnessing bad things happening around them. So, yeah, great movie, 4 out of 5 stars. Highly recommended to watch. Just don't let your kids watch this one if they like dolls still. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode, Child's Play 2, in the Hack and or Slash series coming up here in the near future whenever I get around to shooting it, and we can all look forward to that, I suppose. So, until next time, this is Genome, putting all the dolls that he sees in his vicinity into the trash heap.